Hi there, I'm Nathan, and I'm the head of developer relations here at Virtu Inc. Virtu is the creator of the Anka Build virtualization software, which allows you to create ephemeral or even persistent Macintosh VMs for your developers. These VMs are isolated from the host. You can mount a volume in, you can attach a USB device like an iPhone for an iOS test, and you can even suspend the VM in a specific state, push it to the Anka Build cloud registry, and pull it to a completely different node, which then you start the VM and get back the exact state that you had it in. It's very familiar for most developers. They'll notice that it seems very similar to Docker, and we intentionally did that so that it sort of is less work getting it integrated with your CI/CD systems. Now, I'd like to show you how to use the Anka Build virtualization software with GitHub Actions. We are currently, at the time of recording this, in beta for GitHub Action, our GitHub Action, and so things may be different by the time that you're watching this, though I'm going to try and keep it simple and basic enough that you get the idea. Great, so the first thing to do is to find it on the marketplace, just to make sure and show you that it's there. So here you go. Here's the action. Again, you can see that we're in beta right now. It's a pre-release, but it has instructions on usage and examples. The first thing to do is to start here. It says to install the Anka Virtualization CLI onto a Macintosh host machine. Then you'll need to create a template and tag. And so let's check out the virtualization CLI instructions. This is our getting started repo, Veertu Inc. getting started. And this contains scripts and instructions for getting up and running with all of our software. It will automate the installation of most software, though you will need to obtain a trial license. So make sure to go over to virtu.com/getting started Anka trials and grab your license, then follow the rest of the instructions to get up and running. I have already installed Anka on my local machine, so Anka version shows 2.2.3 Anka build. And so let's go ahead and double check that I have the template and tag available. Yep, I have a template and tag right here. And here is the tag. Now, this is left over from a previous job, so I'm going to just quickly clean these up. And then what we want to do is copy the name. You can also copy the UUID. We're going to use these later. I suggest using the name anytime you can because it makes it easier for developers coming in to help maintain your workflow file. All right, so the first thing to do is to install the virtualization CLI onto a host machine, get it licensed, and then you'll need to create your template and tag. And then we move on to installing and ensuring that you have registered a shared or even project-specific self-hosted runner with GitHub. These runners need to be running on the host machines. You run your Anka virtualization CLI, and that's because they will run the Anka commands to create a VM and then also pass the commands that you want to run in the VM into the VM. Great, so I actually have two of those ready to go. I'll show you exactly how to get the information for downloading the GitHub Actions runner and also registering it in a moment here. The first thing we need to do though is create an empty repository. I'm going to call this GitHub Actions testing. You can use private repositories. I'm doing this under my regular account. You can do it under an organization if you want. And let's create. Great, so now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to make dir GitHub Actions testing, GitHub Actions testing, and I'm going to execute these commands. All right, let's go back here and refresh. Perfect. Now we have a repository that we can use, and it's private. We see the Actions tab right here, and there shouldn't be anything under that. We get this Getting Started page, and then Actions here, and we have no current runners. Now, just to reiterate, you can create a project specific, that's this section, or you can create an organization shared runner. I don't have an organization to show you how that works, but you go under organization settings and then actions, and it'll look almost identical to this. First of all, we can't create a runner without a workflow file, so we need to do that first. So let's go back to our main section or repo, go under actions, and then set up this workflow. Great. So we actually get an example workflow file here. It's called blank.yaml. Let's just keep it blank.yaml. Name's fine. Let's go ahead and delete on pull request. We don't care about that. Let's remove some of these comments so it's easier to see what's going on. This is the jobs. And then the first job is called build. It runs on Ubuntu latest, which is hosted hardware of GitHub. This isn't self-hosted yet. This is gonna go and run on whatever GitHub provides. And I believe it's free. They provide free VMs. All right, and then the steps for this job. Here's steps, and then here's the steps. We've got uses, and then we do a checkout action. So we get our repo on the host machine and available to us. Then we're going to run a command on the host, and let's go ahead and do an ls. Let's do a git status, and let's do host name. Let's delete this. We don't need the other. And then let's go ahead and commit this and see what happens. We don't have our self-hosted runners up yet, you'll probably notice. And that's fine. Let's go ahead and just make sure that workflows actually run. There we go. We get our workflow. The workflow is named CI, create blank. And we get build as the first job. And then we just need to be patient. So again, this is going out to GitHub and requesting one of their hosted containers or VMs, whatever it is on their end. Setting up was finished. You can actually see the operating system's Ubuntu, virtual environment. We then run the first action here, which is checkout. That checks it out to home/runner/work, sets up authorization. Then we execute the commands on the host. So you can actually see that we have the README available for the repository that we just created. So we kind of know we're in the right place. This is the host name output, and then it cleans up after itself. Great. So we can use GitHub Actions. This looks great. Let's go ahead and go back here, and let's go under workflows and back into our blank.yaml. Let's edit that. Perfect. So now we're ready to start adding the Anka VM GitHub Action. To do that, you can come over onto the right here, and you can do Anka. And you can select this, or you can come to the marketplace page and you can use latest version, and it gives you an example of what to put in your file. Let's go ahead and use the one over here. So if we click on this, it's going to give us a bunch of output here. Let's copy it and let's paste it in. So wow, this is a lot of stuff. We aren't going to use most of these, but they're included by default. Let's go ahead and get our indentation correct. There we go. All right, so this is GitHub Action 1. Let's name it properly. It's using the right version. It's got width and a bunch of stuff. So for this demo, we're not going to use most of these inputs, they're called. And that's fine. So let's go ahead and delete all of these. You can see that there's some stuff like skip registry pull. This skips the registry pool, and it's useful if your registry is down, but the template and tag are still on the node. The artifacts root directory, host command options. You can specify Anka run options, which you'll see a little bit later. The start options, you can run post commands on the host before you actually execute things in the VM, etc. So let's go ahead and delete all these. We're not going to use them. Let's create a multi-line input here. Anka tag, let's empty that out. Let's empty out Anka template as well. And so what we want to do is we want to paste in the template name. So we're back here and let's do Anka list. And let's grab this name for the template. There we go. And let's put a watch on the Anka list command so we can see what's going on with the VMs being created. Anka tag, let's go ahead and do base. You can see I have a tag here that's already been pulled that has several layers to it. I'm just going to keep base because I just want a fresh Macintosh to work with. And then echo 1, 2, 3, echo 4, 5, 6. Host name, let's print the working directory. Let's do Java and then version. Now, something to note here, quotes, and you'll notice later that quotes need to be escaped. That's because we wrap all of the commands here, we pass those in and we wrap them with double quotes as well. So you actually have to escape this in order for it to run on the Anka VM. Else there's no guarantee that it won't run just on the host machine. All right, so this looks good as our first action runs. So let's go ahead and test it. Oh, but I just remembered I don't have any self-hosted runners yet. So let's go ahead and go back here and let's go under actions. And you can see that there's no self-hosted runners. Let's add a runner. So it's going to give you the download instructions for the actual runner binary and then a config. I've done these first 3 steps, so all I need to do is copy the config sh and paste it in here. Let's name it Nathan MacBook Pro 1. And these are the labels. These labels come by default. We're actually going to use the first 2, so adding something else is optional, but let's do runner 1. And then use the default work directory. The next step that it says is to do run.sh. So run.sh. And it's listening for jobs. Perfect. Let's go back to the actions. And we can see that we now have an idle self-hosted runner. And you can see the label right here, runner 1, and then all the defaults. Let's add a second one. I want to show you how to run 2 VMs in parallel on the same node. I'm going to call it MacBook Pro 2, runner 2. Defaults are fine. All right. And then /run.sh. All right, both are now listening for jobs. Perfect. Okay, so now we can go back to our editor and we can simply commit this change. Okay, now we're going to go into the Actions tab right here. And we're going to see that we now have it running. Workflow's running. Here's the job. So far, so good. And we got a failure, but it's showing our step here. So unable to locate executable file. Oh, I know what's causing that. Let's go back here and go into our workflows file. Let's edit it again. And you can actually see that we still have runs on Ubuntu latest here. So of course, Ubuntu latest isn't going to have the Anka virtualization or Anka build virtualization binary and software installed. So let's go ahead and add self-hosted macOS. These were the labels that you saw earlier when we actually registered the runners. And let's go ahead and commit that change. I'm going to actually edit this, keep it open, and open up Actions in a separate tab. There we go. So you can see it's actually running the job now. The first runner picked it up. You can actually see it just created a VM, and it switched back to the base tag for that template. So everything looks great. Let's go ahead and refresh here. All right, so the first commands that we're going to run are out on the host. You can actually see virtu.local. That's my actual host name for my MacBook Pro here, and we see the repository that was cloned. This is what we want to see. Then down here, we're going to see the output for the Anka VM GitHub Action. So you can see under run, we have all the with stuff that we set, and then all the commands passed in multi-line. And the virtualization CLI found at, so that's good, it found that, found the template and tag, or it's using this template and tag rather, and then it's pulling both of those. It successfully pulled, then it cloned 10.15.4 and named it with a unique name, and that was successful. Then it did an Anka list, and we got the list output, and these are both in a suspended state here. So you see both suspended. So that's good, and then it starts. So you can see that I've got 6 CPU cores for this and 10 gigs of RAM. So I have a 12 virtual core MacBook Pro, so I want to run 2 VMs at the same time on that machine. Therefore, I'm going to want to split 50-50. So one VM is going to get half of the virtual cores available, the other is going to get the other half. This is fine for CPU, but it's not fine for RAM. You don't want to 50-50 it. If I have 2 VMs running and they're both using 50-50 for RAM, and I max out the RAM usage for my builds and tests that run in those VMs, I'm likely going to crash the system. So you always want to give some breathing room, about 4 gigs available for RAM, and that's pretty safe bet. This only uses 2 VMs, will only use 20 gigs at a time, leaving plenty for what I've got running on my MacBook Pro. You can see the hard drive, add-ons version, and some VNC information. Now it's running the commands now, and it shows you what commands. There's no options being passed in from the user. And then we get to the Anka run command. So Anka run by default will wait for networking to start and wait for the time to sync. Then it passes the commands in. Here are the commands. It wraps them with quotes. Again, that's why we want you to escape these. And then we start executing. So we get back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We get Mac Mini Local. That's the default hostname for VMs. So that confirms that we're executing commands inside of the VM. Then we've got private var because we pwd. By default, when you run Anka run, it's actually going to mount the current working directory into the VM. Now, be careful with that. Let's stop for a second and talk about that. The build and test time can be significantly impacted by the default host to guest mount. So know that your builds and tests are likely going to see a huge performance decrease. You can disable this, and I'll show you how to disable it in a second here. Let's go ahead and come here, and then let's add Anka run options. And then the Anka run options that we want to include are wait network, wait time, and no volume. So this will disable that mount. Now, obviously, you're going to have a problem if you're using the first action, checkout, and the checkout checks out onto the host, and then you don't mount it into the VM, it's not going to be available. So if you disable the volume, it's best to remove this and simply do your git clone commands in here. And then repo, whatever it ends up being. Now, that requires that you put within the template or within the tag the secrets necessary in order to clone a private repo. So keep that in mind, that you can't rely on the token that GitHub Actions includes by default on the host to do private repo cloning. Anyway, so let's get back to this. So let's go ahead and remove the Anka run options for now. All right, so this location right here is something to keep in mind. This is the PWD's results. This is the directory on the VM that you're in when you are using the volume mount. And this is useful in case you need to CD out of that directory to do something on the VM, not in the mounted volume, and then maybe move files back. This is useful location to know if you're doing artifact uploading to GitHub and you need to run your build and test from a different directory and then just move the files that it creates and logs into the mounted volumes so that you can upload them as an artifact. But we have documentation on that, so I'll keep moving. Then we get the actual error, and so you can see the step failed. That's the Java-version, so no Java runtime present. And so you can see that it threw an error, and you'll see the stack trace there. If we come back here, we're going to see that we're using the base tag. This doesn't include Java by default, so we need to actually use a tag that has Java on it. So if I come here, this is the Anka build cloud controller. And it's got the registry attached. If I come here and I go to my template, I can see that I've got a tag available to me with OpenJDK, so I'm actually going to use that. So if we paste it in here, and then we simply commit these changes. Before I commit though, what I want to do is I actually want to create a whole new job to run in parallel. So let's get rid of some of this spacing and let's go ahead and copy this whole thing here. Oh, just build, and you can see it's warning that there's duplicates. Let's name this build 2. Oh. And so you can see it's still going to use self-hosted. We don't actually need to execute commands on the host. We know that works. And then the Anka VM GitHub Action, and let's name this 2. Let's use the same template, but let's use the brew and git tag. Let's then run the same exact commands. All of that will work. And let's actually do it without the volume mount. All right, let's go ahead and commit these changes. Now what you're going to see here is you're going to see both of our runners pick up 2 different jobs. So here's build and here's build 2. You can then see that OpenJDK is now available, and it switched to that. It then did the clone, and then it's likely going to switch back to just brew and git tag. Let's give it a second here. Actually, let's take a look at the interface. All right, so the first one finished and the second one's running, and the first VM's gone, and you can see that it succeeded. That's great. This is perfect. And then let's go ahead and check out what build 2 is doing here. Seems like it's taking a while. There we go. You can actually see that it switched and then it did the clone just like we saw before. And we're now seeing output. Great. So what caused that delay was actually, let's see if we can refresh and get the output for that. That failed. A lock file was found. You cannot pull 2 different tags for the same template at the same time. So one will create the lock, the first one, and then the other will wait until that lock file is gone, and then continue on. So let's not look at this failure just yet. Let's go to the first step here. All right, so we got again confirmation this is running on the host. Then we got all the output that shows that we did the registry pull, we did the creation of the VM, we started the VM, then we ran the commands inside, and we actually got OpenJDK this time. So that confirms that the tag had the right thing on it, and then it tried to run this one in parallel, but it couldn't because of the lock file, but technically they ran at the same time. So if you have more than one node, I only have one machine I'm running my runners on, but if you have a bunch of them, then you're going to get these running in parallel. One's going to go to one node and the other's going to go to the other node. There we go. We got these lock files like you would expect. Registry pool, it starts, and then look under here, we get no volume passed into the Anka run. That's perfect. We're getting the right host name. Because we're not mounting a volume, we get the user's Anka. Anka is the default user on Anka VMs. And then we get no Java runtime present. So this is perfect. This is exactly what we would expect. Everything looks great. And we're running two different jobs in parallel. We're passing in the commands we want. And so one last thing that I want to show you is just like having to escape these quotes under commands, if you want to echo I am and then who am I? If you want to do this, because the action is actually just executing commands in a terminal on the host, you're going to actually interpolate who am I for the host into the VM when you run this echo. And actually, of course, I need to escape these quotes. So what you want to do is you actually want to escape the $sign here as well. And this is because if you don't, the Anka run command is going to interpolate this from the host and then execute this as a whole inside of the VM. And we intentionally left that ability for you because sometimes you'll want to get information from the host. Like let's say you have a shared network volume amongst all your nodes. They have a file that's necessary that has maybe a secret inside of it, shared for all of your nodes that run the virtualization software. And you want to cat that from the host itself into the VM when you need it. This is possible doing this. So you can do cat and then path to the file, and it will be available inside of the VM. I don't want to do that. I just want to get the who am I from the VM itself. Quotes you always have to escape. So just keep that in mind. All right, so this looks good. Let's go ahead and run that, and let's add the who am I am, just to show you how this works. Right here. All right, that's saved, and then we should get this to kick off. There we go. And one line script failed, and it says not a Git repository. So we can see that we're no longer doing the action checkout, and therefore it can't get status. So this is going to fail. It's expected, and so like let's just go ahead and then delete this. All right, it's setting up the job. It's running, and it's going to have to pull again. Now again, this Anka Build Cloud is a really handy piece of software to have when you're using the virtualization software, the Anka Build virtualization software. This allows you to manage your templates and tags from a UI, and then what nodes are attached to the registry and controller. And so you can manage disk space, all sorts of other things there. All right, great. So we got this completed and the other one failed. That's expected. Let's come in here and let's scroll down. And so we get I am Nathan Pierce. So again, this was showing that the host interpolation happened here. And yet we should see I am Anka, because Anka is the default user. Great. So that's pretty much it. That's the basics on using the Anka VM GitHub Action. Or grab your trial license, install it on your local machine, and then start playing around right away with this Great. So that's pretty much it. That goes over the basics of using this with the Anka Build virtualization software. There's a lot more features here. You can see them on the marketplace. Right here, you can see that you can customize the VM name on the host. You can pass in these options like we did. Start options is useful for attaching USB devices to certain VMs. You can specify the files to get put into an archive that then gets uploaded as an artifact. And again, this requires the mounted volume and then skip registry. You're familiar with all these. Now there is a standard output and error combined, and we create an output. And so you can see an example of using that. It has steps. It's like we've got steps here. We have the ID pull test 2, so steps, pull test 2, outputs, and then STD. And the STD you can then grep to check for certain output. So this allows you to run tests on output to make sure that your commands are executing properly, you're getting back what you need, or you can use this for subsequent steps. So if you have some sort of token or message output in your standard out, you can actually grab that, so you can run your Anka VM GitHub Action, run all your tests and stuff, output some message, and then you can find that message in this output and then use that in a subsequent like Linux step, or really any other type of step. So that's pretty handy feature. Great. So I think that's it. Contact us if you have any questions. Otherwise, have fun and good luck.